Привет из Дубая. С вами передача «ГолубьМира», где разбираем крутые навыки. Спрашиваем на английском, отвечаем на русском. Подтягивайте язык или смотрите перевод в тайм-кодах. Let's talk about risk aversion and let's start with the definition.
To be honest, first time I have heard about this definition, it was sounds like risk appetite. And I was wondering, what does mean? Okay, I have appetite for the meal or for the food, but what's mean appetite for the risk? And suddenly I was working for people in investment fund, and they told me if someone wants to buy assets or maybe some resources or shares, we ask this person how many money he or she wants to make. If he or she wants to have a high probability of profit, then it would be also the high probability of risk. So if someone wants to be conservative, he or she will choose not high risk, and it would be a low risk appetite. So low risk appetite is like a risk aversion.
Well, I do believe like when we look at the risk, when we're defining our appetite, we need to define the size of the risk or maybe like the shape of the risk to understand like whether there's like a poison or whether it still will be tasty and we can consume it. So how we would go about assessing the risk before we will make a conclusion on our appetite towards it?
This is a very long chain. First, we should think about opacity, dangerous.
Dangerous.
Dangerous is something which are not named. For example, we're afraid of some from some control, or we're afraid of some floating on the market. Second, we should think about this dangerous. They could lead to the threats, and threats is something which has a name. For example, we could contact with a fine. We could meet with some aggressive competitor, or maybe we will have currency exchange rate fluctuation. And then when we calculate the amount or volume of the threats, we will get to the risk. So risk is like a end of the chain. Dangerous, then threat, then risk. And when we try to avoid it or calculate it, or to calculate risk appetite, usually we take a bucket or portfolio or something like a can and put there several objects with different level of risk. For example, if I am conservative, I could take like 10 pieces which have risk not more than 10%. If I am middle risk appetite, I could take, for example, 5 with 80% of no risk, and maybe 50% with like 40% risk. If I am brave, I could take, for example, something more. So when you create your bucket, you should understand that risk is amount of money which you could probably lose.
And when we come to these thresholds, obviously, like there might be different ones, and what might be the things that actually affecting them. For example, it might be like a different time or different personal or business circumstances, or like maybe even probability of appearing something on the horizon that actually also would affect our decision. So how do we encounter all of this in order to embed into our model and to make more or less good or acceptable decision?
It's easy and complex in the same time. You have already told this phrase, which was exactly describing what you're asking for. Probability of probability. I don't know how to say it in English. Maybe you'll help me. This is Bayesian probability. Is it okay to say? Bayesian probability. So, for example, I have a measurement of risk, something about like 40%. If some conditions will happen, I will have 40% losses. But how deeply I believe in this probability? For example, I will say, okay, I think that there is a 20% probability of 40% losses. And in this case, I will get my risk appetite or amount of risk. It's much easier to explain, for example, on the CRM deals. For example, I am your employee, and suddenly I will came to you and I will something talk like this. Okay, Maxim, maybe in the next month, I will close the deal in size of like 10 millions with probability of 20%. This would mean for you that if I will take this 10 millions with probability 20%, you could put in my plan like 2 million of the closed deal. So it's very strange. Nothing was happening right now, but we could already count it in the bucket, in the portfolio, or in the risk assets.
And sometimes, let's say, like we also may have some sort of like a defaults when it comes to the risk. So there should be, I would say, maybe principles or maybe fundamentals or maybe rules when we're actually saying, okay, like this is something that I cannot take. Maybe it's might be something that's not quantifiable, but something which more falls into quality category. So what might be the framework here?
It was several times when I was head of different divisions. I was head of security, head of credit department, head of risk management, head of collection. And sometimes I was asked by my shareholders why we do not do something like our competitors do. And I was always saying, you know, if we will do this, we will become as everyone else, and we have probability of penalty or some other kind of наказание, punishment, yes, thank you. And suddenly my shareholders several times were told me, okay, how big is the fine? And first time I learned it was like 50% or 50,000 Ukrainian hryvnias. And suddenly I realized, without noticing any smile on the face of my shareholders, this is a very small price for this deal. And suddenly I realized, if I have something against the deal, if I'm afraid fine or penalty or punishment, I should calculate if it is possible to make it twice or even several times. For example, if you will break the rules of road movement, is it okay to say rules of road movement? Road traffic?
Traffic rules is good.
Traffic rules, okay. Sometimes it would be the same penalty. For example, you will go on the, I don't know, yellow light, and you will always pay like $20. But some breaking the rules will make it like in progression. For example, for first case, you will get like $20. For second, you get like $200. For last time, you will get like, I don't know, $1,000, and then you will be лишен прав. Will take
lost the driver license.
You will lose the driver license. So you do not want to be on the second or third stage, but usually in business, you could take risk as many as you want.
And sometimes we also may not only making all of the moves by ourselves, but we also might be dealing with the counterparties that also may want or may not take risks. So let's say, like, if we want to adjust their way of thinking, of making decision, how we would may potentially make them to see the thresholds that we want them to see, or probably not to see, so that they take or not or refuse to take certain risks, so that, you know, like, it would be to our benefits. Probably it's affected to, you know, like, it's related to game of theory, but I think it's also might be related to hacking, like when you're trying to not really make someone to make a decision, but you decorate a tree or like use anything else so that someone else can deal with the tree but not with you.
You know, you're asking me a very nice question, but I don't know how to answer, to be honest. But let me try. For example, we will go on the dark street. Suddenly, we will be stopped by some hooligans, and they will show a knife or maybe pistol. And for example, for me, it's quite usual situation. I used to live in these conditions, so probably I know what to say, and probably I know what to do. But maybe you was born with a silver spoon in the mouth, so this is not usual for you, and maybe you will be a bit afraid. And after, when we finish this, in any case, if we are alive or in hospital, you will say me, come on, Oleg, we will never do it again. So you will say me that this is kind of risk is unacceptable. But before we go to the street, I do not knowing what will happen. Another example, for example, maybe you will be in the same city where I'm staying right now in 1 or 2 weeks, and maybe I will invite you for several negotiations. But you know, I'm afraid of it because, for example, several guys whom I already was taken to these negotiations, after this conversation, were talking to me, we will never do it again. You know, it's so scary. Okay, it's nice lesson, but one time it's quite enough. Or for example, another way, you hoping for the best, you open your business as you have done in Singapore, but suddenly something will happen in law, in some sanctions, in some other conditions, market conditions, and suddenly you will be realizing that all your time you spent to your business will be lost, and you will be staying without savings. It was not your attempt, it was not your dream, but it happens. So risk, it's not what you want to do or do not want. It is happening, and you have ability to predict it and to calculate. Once again, several years ago, we bought to my wife a car, fancy one, and it is expensive, and to make insurance, it's also expensive. And each year she asked me, maybe we will not do the insurance. And I always telling to her, okay, we almost do not use this car, so we go outside very, very rarely. But if we will put a small scratch on a car which would cost like 20 times more, our insurance will help us. And suddenly I see in the eyes of my wife that she realized that this insurance not just protection for us, but also for another cars, which I call like a safe, sometimes so expensive as they carry a pure gold.
And I do believe this line of thoughts actually might be the nice conclusion for the question, like how knowing about the risk adverse would help to make the world a better place. А мы рассмотрели навык неприятия риска и чем он полезен именно вам. Всем мира!